Hello dear students, welcome to the second part of this video where I'm going to discuss more about, critically analyzing the media content. So in my earlier video, we have already discussed some of the important factors that we need to keep in mind while, uh, you know, taking a critical look at the media, right? So let's find out what more we have to learn about, becoming a serious media critic. And it's very important in this particular age, where you are spoon fed by the information. And it's only because, there is so much of information, the vast information, right? Sea of information, and you can't get through all this information, one by one or one after another, right? So you must have to compromise with the media content, and which is, I believe is a serious crime in this particular age. So that is why I emphasize that you must, from now onwards, you must try to become a media literate in order to find out that how can you get rid of, this getting compromised with the media contents. So let's learn something more about, critically analyzing media. So when I say that, uh, uh, critical, critically, analyzing media is about, thinking beyond the media content. It's not like, trusting the content, and it's not also getting close to the content or making deal with the content, relationship with the content. So just keeping you far from the content and try to still, keep your eyes on it, right? So while doing that, what are the different things that you need to keep in mind? So there are some of the points that I've jotted out in this slide, which I would like to briefly discuss uh, on this particular point. So number one, when I say that when we were discussing about critical thinking in our earlier video, so we have almost touched some of the important points, but what critical thinking should not always be. It should not always be, as we already discussed, that it should not be limited to the data. It should not be limited to the assessment of you know evidences, or it should not be like it is about research. I totally agree to that you have to research before believing onto a data, but it is also something must come to your mind, which is very intellectual, which is also very spiritual in meaning. For example, say you have so much of information in front of you, so that information has no meaning to you, right? Because they are only the representation of data, facts and figures. So you can add meaning to them when you add message to that, when you have understood the value of that particular message in a contemporary context, right? Or say, if you can find out the relevance to the different contextual backgrounds of that particular media content. So critical thinking is not always about taking care of the data, facts and figures, and evaluating an assessment of the data. It is also not always jumping into the conclusion. So by that I mean that if a particular media content is represented and you have come across that, and you have read out that particular news, you have understood the information, you have understood the message that a particular news is trying to convey to you. So that doesn't mean that you end up looking at that news, or you end up getting the information there itself. It's not like that. You must keep searching for other related context or other related information to this particular content or to this particular context. So it's not always about one particular media content is not an end in itself. It has a relation to several different contents which can, create a larger meaning, right? For a larger period of time. So we must not wrap up the conversation. We must not wrap up our discussion when a particular, when you know try to understand, or when you have already understood that okay, this particular media message is conveying us this particular message. So that doesn't mean that you end up looking for that information in any other sources, or to try to discuss on that with your peer groups. You don't stop discussing on that particular issue, and you don't have to conclude any particular uh, you don't have to conclude the message. You don't have to conclude the discussion over that particular message being circulated by a media platform. Okay, so this is how critical thinking should not always look like. Okay, then instead what should it focus into? We must know about that also. So instead of that, we must freely share our ideas and experiences over a particular media content. We must be so much independent enough that you can share your experiences, your perception, your views and opinions over a particular media content. Okay, so it's about discussion. It's about creating a large pool of ideas, and then pushing it beyond the boundaries, so that it can create some possibilities that may be helpful for the larger span of life. Okay, so that is where again I must uh, refer, or I must bring into the context of this futuristic content of media. So every content that we build or we create today must have that tendency to uh, tendency of farsightedness. It must have that value of farsightedness. So predicting the future value of the content is very important. We must look into that very characteristic also when we are looking at media content. And while doing that, we must have this capability to visualize what this particular content is going to have impact on the environment, media environment, or upon the media users, right? And when you understood that this is somehow going to have this kind of consequence, so that doesn't mean that you have already concluded that particular message. You must keep going on evaluating the very achievement of that content, and you must also think of if you can add more value to that content in order to you know brighten the future more. Okay, so criticizing media in this particular, age where so many digital, social media platforms, digital devices we are dealing with here, uh, one very interesting thing that I must, point out here is it has changed out the entire communication process, I must say. And it was during while I was doing my graduation in mass communication and journalism. So even you might have come across different communication theories where it is being you know taught to us that okay, communication process, communication is an entire process. It is a cycling process, and it can never be completed if there is no feedback. So we give so much of importance to the feedback. Even today you will find that feedback has always remained a very important segment in order to complete the process or cycle of the communication. But in today's digitalization age, I argue that feedback has no it has no more remained the very uh, uh, connecting link, okay, of the unending process of communication. I will not say that anymore. Why I say that? Because in today's age, you'll find that let's take a very simple example. You have your account, right, in different social media platforms, right? And for example, say in Twitter, in politics, right? So different political leaders, they are putting their own post, and you'll find that they also attract so many comments on their particular post. So what are those comments? Those comments are feedback. If you take those comments as a feedback, then do you think that those feedback, wrap up the discussion? Those feedback, close the discussion on that particular topic that the main post that the politician had posted. Do you think that? No. Those feedbacks again, spark a controversy. Those feedbacks again, they open many doors towards different cycle of communication which you can't imagine. There is an unending process of communication which is being opened by these feedbacks. And I'm talking about these comments, if you take them as a feedback, these are feedback. You can't you can't conclude them. You can't uh, conclude, or you can't wrap up any discussion, right? If you post any of your opinion on social media, and you keep on uh, getting comments over your post, you'll find that it's not only about the comments. You'll also find some sub comments of your comments. So there is an unending process of communication cycle which is being opened. So there are so many infinite doors of communication being opened by the digitalization today. So that's where we stand, and that's how we need to understand the communication and media today. So this is how this entire shift in the media landscape has occurred. Okay, so yeah, I think we have almost discussed some of the important points that we need to understand uh, in order to develop critical thinking of looking at media content. And we will also be discussing more about all these media criticism uh, in this entire semester. So uh, I'll be waiting for you all people in the class. Thank you so much.